It's a sad day for all Jordanian. In the same time, as Jordanian, we are proud for the greatness that our beloved late pilot Kasasba did, as all see that he was dying, meanwhile he was standing and proud.
They are the first terrorist group to succeed in delivering a well-crafted and polished video message to the world. They are also the first terrorist group to make it very clear they will kill anyone with impunity and revel in the world's attention. How do you stop someone ready and willing to die, no matter what it takes to get their message across? You start by talking to the experts, beginning with former CIA operative and someone who has had his boots on the ground and dirty in plenty of related theaters. Gary Berntsen joins us on the show. Gary, good to see you again.
Pleasure to be with you today, Ed.
I don't think anybody in an intelligence capacity, Gary, tell me if I'm wrong, is really shocked at the least with this recent video. They were simply waiting for the cost of poker to go up, and it indeed has.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. No one who does this business, is surprised. ISIS has demonstrated a willingness to violate all societal norms that. And the reason is this. There's just a story I'll tell you. Years ago, Giandomezio Pico, who was an Italian diplomat for the UN who negotiated the freedom of the Western hostages in Beirut, had a discussion with Ahmad Mugnia, who was negotiating an alias as Abdullah with a mask over his head. But what he said to Pico was interesting. He said, you have nuclear weapons, you have aircraft, you have ships. All we have is this violence. And this is how ISIS looks at it. That to counter all the advantages we have in the West, they will use unrestricted, unmitigated violence and terror against the West.
What they also have, though, along with violence, they have bodies and they have time. Because, Gary, looking at what's happened here, it would seem as if this is a group that truly does have a death wish. Because what they're doing, they know that this is not going to really make any government back away, except, of course, the United Arab Emirates, who decided they wanted to get out in December, basically, from the coalition. But it's not going to make anybody want to back down. They're going to want to come at them even greater. They're going to want to kill them. They want this, don't they, Gary?
Well, they recognize, though, that in the Middle East, where there are some royal families, that those governments in places like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and the UAE, some of them are more popular than others, but in Saudi specifically, they believe that there's an underclass that may be sympathetic to their message, that there are people fertile, there's fertile ground for recruitment, and they have demonstrated already their ability to grow their ranks, that there are the dispossessed, the masses in the Middle East that are looking for something different. This is that something different. And they've grown their numbers from a few thousand to, a couple of 100,000 maybe.
Is Jordan making the wrong choice here when they just execute the two prisoners they had? And here's the reasoning behind that I've heard from some folks is, look, it doesn't make any difference. These are throwaway bodies to ISIS. They don't care. You could go ahead and kill 2,000 of them because the core leadership of ISIS is in control, and this is nothing more than dirt that they throw out on the ground. So in essence, all you're doing is you're giving them more reason to go back to their people, their followers, and say, these are the Satans. This is why we must kill them.
Those executions were done for Jordanian domestic
only,
public support,
yes,
for the king to maintain his support there, and that was because they wanted blood and revenge, and he had to give them something immediately. But agreed, ISIS doesn't lose anything on that. But the problem for ISIS here, though, is will a growing level of support among tribal groups in Jordan shore up the king, come to fight? There's pluses and minuses for this, but ISIS is in this for the long haul. They're not going away, and they're not going to be defeating themselves by doing this. A force on the ground is going to be required to destroy them. They're not going away on their own, and they're not going away because they make missteps. They're going to have to be beaten on the battlefield.
Gary, in the New York Times this morning, the headline, ISIS is losing in Iraq. Do you agree?
I don't agree. I disagree. They're there for the fight. They're going to have to be. They've lost a town here and there, but they still have significant resources. They still have Mosul. They've been cut off from Mosul, but look, they're not going away, and they're going to be in this game for the long haul.
Is the tide, though, not turning even the slightest? Because certainly the airstrikes, they have been pounding them here. Heavy losses on the ground, equipment losses. It's got to be doing something.
Well, they've degraded some of their capacity, but Think of the Civil War in the United States. How long and how many battles required? How long did that fight go on for? How many required to die before that war moved in one direction or the other? I believe, again, it's going to require a force on the ground, a serious force on the ground, with a large coalition with special operators from the U.S. and agency people from the U.S. all together and beat them back, because they're not losing steam. Yes, there's reporting that's saying this, but I'm not convinced.
Here's another line. American military officials in Iraq tell me, and this is from the New York Times article, they are confident that a smaller, revamped Iraqi army will be ready to begin operations, big operations, to retake Iraq from the Islamic State in the next 4 to 8 months. Is that perhaps one of the more misleading and naive things that you have heard from what you hear on the ground?
We'll see. I mean, up to this point, the group that's been most effective fighting on the ground there have been Shia militias led by the Iranians. That's the real truth. It hasn't been the Iraqi army.
So then what is, at this point, the thing that, and I know we've talked about this, and the American people, I think, are really getting tired of hearing this, because we constantly come back to this. We have an enemy that is willing to die, that is in many cases looking to die, that will burn people alive. They put out marvelously produced videos. They've probably got the media down better than some television networks around the country, certainly those overseas. So what do we do? Where's the starting point here? Because this whack-a-mole game has got to stop.
Well, what we need to do, which this administration has failed to do, is to build a coalition that will put ground forces on the ground there, sweep across them, and destroy ISIS.
American ground forces. American ground forces.
Some American special operators, but ground forces from places like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, armor, the whole thing. We're going to need that to sweep across there to destroy them.
Real quickly, the United Arab Emirates, as I mentioned, they basically got out of the coalition in December. Does that degrade us any at all? Does that hurt the effort?
I think you want to hold together as many members of the coalition as possible. It doesn't help you, because what we should be doing is expanding the coalition, not diminishing it.
Maybe not from a military standpoint, but from a perspective standpoint, just people looking and seeing that members in the Middle East are staying. That's the important part, correct?
Exactly right. We need to have the entire world. We need to have 150 countries in there lined up against these guys. That's what we need.
After what we saw in this video, it's amazing why more people do not immediately jump on board. Gary Berntsen, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Great pleasure.
All right. American Business next on deck. Bulls, Bears, and Bucks. And later this hour, we deal with the ethics of 3 parents' DNA and 1 child. It's coming up right here, where we question everything on MidPoint.